Meeting was called to order by
Jason Counts.
All right. Quick question for everybody. Janet had sent out minutes for the past couple of meetings. Did everybody receive those? receive those? And if you did, if you have any comments, you should make them, and Janet can make changes or corrections. I don't think we have to officially adopt them unless everybody's already read them. So we could just go on to item number 1, which is me. So I have a presentation. This is exactly the same presentation that I gave to the Board of Commissioners last night. And you're seeing exactly what they saw, as far as I know. And there's a schedule at the end of all of this, of course, of upcoming meetings that the chairman has set and that we're all diligently trying to meet. Well, I'll just plow into this. We really have sort of 3 things to talk about, but only one of them is really, really important. And that, of course, is the proposed ordinance. Stephanie, give me the next one. Okay, so I'm going to talk about where are we, just bring everybody up to date where we are in the process. We're going to talk about the impact fee ordinance. Particularly, we're going to talk about exemptions from impact fees and the fee schedules themselves, because the board has not adopted any fee schedule at all, and upcoming meetings. Okay, Stephanie. So where we are, you got 2 things going. One of them, upper right-hand corner, the capital improvements element has been drafted, and I sent you a copy of that thing. It's not 200 pages long, but it's long enough. I apologize. And the other thing is that the impact fee ordinance has been drafted. County attorney has it under review. He's made a couple of comments, and he and I tried to talk today, but he got called away. So at any rate, it's a draft impact fee ordinance. As soon as it's in final form, I will send it to you immediately. Nothing major in there. His comments were, some wording here and there kind of thing. So it's okay to talk about the draft that you have, because it's pretty close to the whole thing. Okay, Stephanie. And this is jumping ahead before we jump back. But this is kind of a table of contents for you for particular provisions that are in the ordinance. You could download this thing and print it out, and you'll have a table of contents, right away, because there's a lot of stuff in the ordinance. A lot of it is stuff just straight out of the state law. We had to put it in. So at any rate, these are the important things. Next slide, please. Now here's the keys, and we're going to talk about this more today. What's called individual assessments, as well as appeals. Impact fee, you can appeal it, and there are various ways to appeals. We're going to talk about exemptions, what's available in the state law that you could, the county could adopt or not adopt as exemptions, as well as credits. There's credits that developers in particular could get for their project by actually spending money on improvements instead of paying impact fees. So we'll talk about that too. Stephanie. So you all remember the methodology report. That thing had all of this stuff in it, all the calculations, all the mathematics, etc. And as you recall, it ends up with a table of maximum fees. And as I've said before, we figure the maximum because the board can't adopt anything bigger. They can adopt something smaller, but the law says you can't make people pay too much. So they needed to know what's the maximum? What's the ceiling? There's no guarantee they're going to adopt the maximum, but that's what they have at the moment. Okay, Stephanie. Now, the capital improvements element pulls a lot of stuff out of the methodology report. So you've already read a lot of that study. Chapters on adjustments and credits are taken out. The actual impact fee calculations and the maximum fees, those are taken out because this report goes to the state for review and it becomes a part of your comprehensive plan once it's adopted. And DCA just doesn't want to see that other stuff. They only want to see what's in that report. Two things are added to it, an exemption policy and a work program. And I'll particularly talk about the exemption policy. I think most all of you were involved when the last comprehensive plan was put together. And you probably remember there was a community work program in the back of that it had 5 years worth of activities, what projects were going to be undertaken, who was going to do it, that kind of thing. For the impact fee program, we include a version of the community work program that is only the impact fee projects. And it's only the projects that the county departments anticipate coming up in the coming 5 years. Now, one big difference is that while there's the community work program and the comprehensive plan, the county doesn't have to update that except the next time they update the whole comprehensive plan, which is usually 5 or 6 years anyway. But with impact fees, we're going to have to, if the county adopts impact fees, they have to prepare an annual update report every year. And in that, that annual update report, they include the work program and they add another year and drop the old year. So that community work program will always cover 5 years, but it's only the impact fee projects. So we don't have to amend the comprehensive plan with it. But as the annual reports go to the state for review and the county adopts them, then that kind of updates the work program for those types of projects. Okay, Stephanie. One of these days I'm going to learn how to do this myself. So we're going to talk about the exemption policy. This is what's in the state law. The state law allows communities to adopt only one, either up to two types of exemptions. Nothing else is in the law. One of those exemptions can be for what the state calls extraordinary economic development and employment growth. The other one is affordable housing. Those are the two. State law says you got to put the policy, not necessarily the criteria, but you got to put the policy in the comprehensive plan. That's why it's in the CIE, because the capital improvements element amends the comprehensive plan. That's how we take care of that. And obviously it needs to be in the ordinance also. Now here's number 3 is important. Every dollar that is provided in an exemption for either of these categories, the county has to make up the difference with money from somewhere else. So if somebody gets a $10,000 exemption, the county's got to pull $10,000 out of somewhere, probably the general fund, and put it into the impact fee fund. So that's something to consider when we consider exemptions. There's an alternative to this too, and I'm going to talk about that. But this is what the state allows and requires specifically. Okay, Stephanie. So here's what I've put in both the CIE and in the ordinance. Now this is enabling language. It doesn't actually establish that either of these exemptions will be allowed. It just meets the state law requirement that the policy has to be here. And one, of course, has to do with economic advancement. You see, this is a very vanilla description. It doesn't say what economic advancement even is. And that would be up to the Board of Commissioners to define. The other one, of course, affordable housing. Again, it doesn't say what is affordable. It doesn't set any parameters. It just gives the Board of Commissioners the ability to consider either or both of these exemptions, or neither one. It doesn't matter. But the policy is here, and you see that last bit of yellow, that they can actuate one of these exemptions or either of them by adopting criteria. So that's when the Board of Commissioners would say, what is an affordable house, and how are we going to, provide a credit, and how much? What is economic advancement? What is extraordinary economic development and employment growth? That's where, and a lot of different communities have adopted exemptions. I don't think very many end up with the same criteria. They use this for all kinds of things. For affordable housing, there's only one community in the entire state that has adopted an affordable housing exemption, and that's the city of Sandy Springs. And it's a very narrow kind of exemption, and nobody has claimed it. Nobody has taken advantage of it, because if you're building houses in Sandy Springs, it's like St. Simon's Island. You're probably not going to be called affordable housing. So at any rate, but they have one, and the county could identify criteria for it and set up an exemption for affordable housing. Stephanie.
Bill, before you move on.
Yes, go ahead.
Just a question about the idea of the commissioners being able to do this, quote, from time to time. How do we ensure that there's some continuity in terms of the way this might be applied, so that it isn't every project creating a new set of criteria that justifies it for that project and may not be applicable to the next one?
They need to adopt criteria that applies to everybody. That's the key to it. So they have to describe every possible circumstance under which they would grant an exemption with criteria. How many people are you going to employ who will make more than the county, average income? How much is your investment going to be in the buildings? $1 million or more?
No, I understand what you're saying. My concern is that when it says from time to time, it implies that they can just change the criteria at their will depending on what the circumstance is, as opposed to having a set of criteria that they're going to apply uniformly going forward.
Well, let me answer half of your question. Yes, they have to adopt these criteria by resolution. So whatever they adopt applies to everybody who qualify. They can adopt new as they go along, if they think of something different. Maybe that they want to encourage major office buildings for a while, and then they decide, well, we got enough of those, and they may want to encourage other kinds of industries or warehouses or whatever that they think that should be given a break from the impact fees. But no one has tried to adopt criteria on a case-by-case basis. I'm not a lawyer. That seems kind of weird to me. I can't say that some incredible opportunity comes along. We're going to have a space launch place because we steal it from Camden County, and nobody ever thought they were going to have a, who knows what might come along. But at any given point in time, they are restricted to whatever criteria they have applied. And in many cases, it's not unusual for them to have an administrative process. Many communities who have adopted these have allowed the staff, if somebody applies for an exemption and they meet all the criteria, then those exemption policies could even say, okay, you get this much of a percent or whatever. And if they meet all the criteria, the staff can approve it. If it's not on the list, nobody can approve it. I can't tell you that, the board doesn't change its mind from time to time. As I told you, there are actually alternatives to exemptions that others have adopted, and I'll talk about that also. The one big onus with regard to exemptions is that state law says you got to make up the money. You got to put the money in the bank after you grant an exemption. And a lot of communities kind of back off from that, saying, well, wait a minute, we want to give an exemption, but we don't have to dip into, you may as well dip into the general fund and just give them the money because you're going to have to make it up. But yeah, it's a resolution. It's subject to change by the Board of Commissioners as they see fit and go through the adoption process for a new set of criteria or changes to the criteria. Coweta County changed their criteria. They were going along with one set of criteria for economic development, and they started getting a lot of pushback from churches and private schools and this sort of thing. And so they created criteria defining what kind of a nonprofit organization should also be considered as improving the economic development of the county. And they had some silver-tongued consultant to help them work out that language. And they adopted it, and everybody was happy. But by and large, if people do have any kind of credit, well, it's always the economic development credit. One community adopted credits. They wanted to enhance businesses downtown. So they had a defined central business district, and they were looking for restaurants. What else? There were 3 kinds of businesses they felt they didn't have enough of. And so they created credits, economic development, to attract or give a break to those kinds of businesses that locate into the downtown area. I don't know how that all worked out, but that was one application. So you can tie it to there's all sorts of ways to set up one of your Walton County. They have an industrial park of their own, plus there are a couple of other private industrial parks. So they created an exemption. It was only a percentage reduction, but they set up an exemption that if your business, your new factory or warehouse locates in the county industrial park, you got a reduction. So, kind of encourage economic development, particularly of their own kind, particularly since they had to pay the money back themselves. So it's the kind of thing that you can spend a long time just talking to the Board of Commissioners, trying to figure out what do they want to do, how would they apply it. You've got a comprehensive plan with a lot of objectives in it. Which of those objectives could be enhanced with an economic development kind of grant? For affordable housing, we actually developed an affordable housing exemption for a county, and ultimately it did not pass. It was up for adoption, as part of they were updating their whole impact fee program. They decided they didn't have a majority vote. They didn't adopt it, but it was very simple, very straightforward kind of approach. And if the county wants to look at affordable housing exemptions, I got a hot and ready plan I can pull out of my bag to see if that would agree with where they want to go. But that's where they are. They're going to be enabled to adopt them. They don't have to adopt them. If they do adopt them, they can change them from time to time. I don't think anybody's tried to, change the criteria just because somebody walked in the door they didn't think of. But I mean, it's the Board of Commissioners. These are adopted by resolution. You can change them. Stephanie, let's go to the next one there. So that was just a reminder that the maximum impact fees were in that methodology report. This is an abbreviated fee schedule. You've seen the one in the methodology report. It runs on for a couple of pages for each area. And as I say, this is there only to tell the commissioners they can't adopt more. They could easily adopt lower fees. And there's a lot of rules to that too, as you would imagine. But just a reminder, on St. Simon's Sea Island service area, the maximum came out to about a little over $5,500 per dwelling unit. And go to the next one, staff. On the unincorporated mainland, it was notably higher. There are a lot of reasons for that, but that was a little over $7,000 maximum. And go to the next one, Steph. And this line, this slide just compares St. Simon's and the unincorporated mainland areas with regard to those select impact fee land use categories I just pulled out. But it looks at like a 200 unit condo or a 100,000 square foot warehouse and $600,000 shopping center. What would the total fees be at those maximum rates? So you can kind of compare them one to the other and also see what these fees would be charged. The fees look really big for the non-residential uses on here. When you sit down with the actual fee per square foot and just compare it to the price you'd pay down at Home Depot for 1 square foot of the cheapest linoleum flooring you can find, most of those fees are less than the cost of that 1 square foot of linoleum tile. They're almost universally 1% or less than 1% of the total cost of the construction of the project. They look big when you look at them this way, but in terms of the total cost of non-residential projects, that's not nearly as much. With regard to single-family houses, because the average house price or residence, really all residences, the average was so high, $7,000 is again about 1% or so of the cost of the unit. On the mainland, however, $5,000 is more than 1% because the houses are selling for a lot less. So that's $5,500 out of a lower total cost for the house. And y'all can make your own calculations and decisions on those. I know the Board of Commissioners hasn't made any decisions yet, but they're going to be talking about it. And there's no reason not to let them know what you think as a committee or individually. I mean, you're not constrained from writing, letter to my commissioner kind of thing. But that's where we are on those. One more slide, I think. got two more slides. Okay, one was how can these impact fees be reduced? And the obvious first thing is the board can just adopt lower fees. They could just say, well, we only want to adopt fees at 80% of the maximum, 60% of the maximum across the board, and just reduce all of them. They could look at an individual category like fire versus roads, and they could say, okay, we're going to reduce the fire fee to 60% of the maximum, but we're going to reduce the roads fee to 40% of the maximum. And again, this would be done individually for the mainland and for St. Simon's Island. They are independent in terms of these fee schedules. So that's one way that, like I say, there are rules, but they could just adopt lower fees, and that's not unusual. There's exemptions. We talked about the exemptions. They would need to adopt criteria that would reduce the impact fees under those two categories. Now, in the ordinance, there's something called individual fee assessments. This is somebody, maybe their use is on the fee schedule, but they come in and say, well, listen, my business does not operate. You've got me down here as an auto repair shop. We don't bring the autos here. We go to the clients. So that's a lot less traffic. Whatever their explanation is, they can request an individual fee assessment. And this is a process that's laid out. The county would determine, well, given the different circumstances of your business, compared to the way the impact fee was calculated in the first place, that the assessment for that particular use, that particular development, could be reduced in that process. And it's very much an administrative kind of process that the Board of Commissioners enables the staff to handle through the ordinance. Now, if the staff is not able to work something out, that person can always appeal to the board, but it's generally more an administrative process. Another thing is called individual appeals. Anybody can appeal their impact fee anytime. They need to come in and ask for a building permit. They can't just walk in the door and say, I don't know what my fee is, but I know it's going to be too high. So that by applying for a building permit, they know what the impact fee would be. And then they can go through this appeal process to say, well, wait, again, I have reasons why I shouldn't have to pay that. My old grandmother is about to move in with us in this new house. I'm building a mother-in-law suite just for her, and that's going to take all our money, and I just can't afford this impact fee. Whatever. This usually has criteria in which the staff can attempt to resolve the appeal. If they can't, it goes to the Board of Commissioners for a decision. And like I say, you can appeal for any reason. You need to know what the fee is going to be before you appeal it. You can also appeal when you apply for a building permit, and the county can go ahead and give you. First of all, you have to pay the fee up front. You have to pay the fee that's on the schedule, and the staff can issue you a building permit. You can go ahead and start building whatever it is you're going to be building while you appeal the fee. If your appeal is successful, you'll get a refund on the fee you paid. The key to this, though, is you can't get a certificate of occupancy or connection to power until the appeal has been resolved. And either either the county keeps the fee you paid, or you get an appeal approved and a refund. But there's a whole process so that the county won't slow down construction while these appeals are in process. The other thing is, the last thing on the list there is in-kind credits. Excuse me. These are ways in which a developer or a builder could spend money and get a credit for it against the impact fees. Now, the money they spend has to be for a project that's on the impact fee list. Maybe maybe somebody wants to build a shopping center along a major road, and the major road is on the impact fee schedule for widening. Well, the developer can say, well, listen, I really want that road widened, and volunteer to widen the road along his frontage. And whatever that costs, now this has got to be done with county approval and all of that, but whatever that costs becomes a credit against the impact fee for roads that the developer would otherwise have paid. There's even a provision that if your credit is bigger than your impact fee, you can carry over the difference to another similar use in the county. And so you carry over these credits until you finally use them all up. Some people do it, particularly folks who want an improvement done more quickly than the schedule calls for. That's often the case with road improvements. So those are the major ways that people can reduce their impact fees after the ordinance has been adopted with that, the new fee schedule. Stephanie, one more. I think it's one more. Yes, okay. We had that organizational meeting with y'all, the kickoff public hearing. We had a meeting with you, and then September 3rd was that public hearing. Had the presentation of the methodology report to y'all on the 29th. The CIE and the ordinance, as you know, came up for discussion last night with the county commission, and that's where we are today, talking about the CIE and the ordinance. Now, coming up, the chairman has scheduled the first a public hearing. Well, it's two public hearings. One public hearing is to transmit the CIE to the region and the state. That's an advertised public hearing. The CIE must then be sent. This is just like the comprehensive plan process. Most of y'all probably already went through this. That goes to the region. The region in turn sends a copy to Department of Community Affairs, and they have a period of time during which they can review it, comment on it, ask questions about it, whatever. And there's a specific schedule for how long they can take and how this proceeds in the DCA guidelines. In fact, that's one of the things. I think it's like the last chapter in your notebooks. I included the DCA requirements for all that. So on November 5th, there will also be the first public hearing on the impact fee ordinance. Now, that ordinance may or may not have a fee schedule attached to it that the Board of Commissioners has talked about and decided that they wanted to adopt. If they haven't figured that out by November the 5th, which is coming up pretty quick, then the maximum will just be in there because we don't have anything else to put in there but the maximum. But that doesn't mean they're going to adopt the maximum. It just means we got to have a placeholder in the ordinance for the maximum, and that's why it's in your copy. It's just a placeholder. There has to be two public hearings on the ordinance according to the state law. So the second one is scheduled for November the 9th, second reading on the ordinance, and at that meeting, after that public hearing, the Board of Commissioners can adopt the ordinance. They don't have to, but at that point, they can adopt it. But remember that ordinance, you've seen it at the, it's like this paragraph. It says that ordinance has no effect until the county has adopted the CIE. That's because the state law says they got to have a CIE before they can implement impact fees. So the ordinance may be sitting there on November 19th or later. They might put off adopting it until later. And we anticipate that we will hear back from the state and from the region no later than January the 7th. And there was discussion last night. If we get the comments and approvals back from the DCA and the region in a more timely manner, that this could come up for adoption at their December meeting. They'll just be sitting there waiting for approval to adopt the CIE, and they can then adopt it by resolution at that point. So that's the schedule we're looking at. I know there's a lot of ifs and buts in there, but this is what the chairman has set for us, and as due servants, we are working away at it here. So y'all have been real quiet. I just want to open it up for questions on anything, methodology report, CIE, ordinance, whatever you want to talk about.
I have some questions in regard to the ordinance, if I may.
One second, Stephanie, you can go ahead and take that presentation down.
I will do that in just a second. Thanks.
Okay, then we can all get comfortable. Go ahead. What is your question?
Okay, in section 2, findings, purpose, and intent, it goes into detail about being an equitable program and that people bear a proportionate share of the cost. That's an ongoing thing that I see as equitable and proportionate share of the cost. And there are a few things in here that seem a little contradictory to me in the ordinance. There's the aspect of like a long-term resident property owner who has been consistently paying property taxes over a number of years. It seems that this person would be adversely impacted more than someone that comes in from out of the area, because they've continually been paying in property taxes over the course of their lifetime, and it has all been going to, or a good portion of which has been going to capital improvements. Staying on the fair and equitable portion of things, it says shopping centers shall be assessed as a single impact fee in accordance with attachment A as a single use without regard to individual tenants. But as you well know, that in a shopping center, there are so many different uses, including whether it be, they could throw a restaurant in that shopping center. They could throw, whether it was a big box store or a small mom and pop store. So once again, I'm not sure that is fair and equitable.
Let me, before I forget all your questions, on the first one now, of course, impact fees only apply if you're building a new house or a new condo or a new unit. Impact fees do not apply in any way to an existing house. You can add a room, you can add a bathroom, you can add a story on your existing house. There's no impact fee.
Yeah, I understand that, but yeah. Someone that's been paying in taxes throughout their whole life, and they could be a large property owner in the county, and could have contributed a great deal of money, and then they decide they want to move into a new home. It just seems like they would be adversely impacted more than someone that had just moved into the community, into a new dwelling that has paid nothing into this community.
I think the defense from the Board of Commissioners would be, while they were paying those taxes, they were also enjoying all of the services and facilities that the county supplies. Somebody just moving into the county didn't get any of those benefits because they just got here. So it all boils down to increases in demand for services. Someone who's been living here for decades and decides to build a new house and move into it. Before we had one house to be served by the county. Now we have two houses to be served by the county. Whoever buys their existing house, they don't pay any impact fees. They just get to move in. The person moving out of that house would be paying an impact fee for a new house because the demand for services has just gone up by one house. It's more. So I don't know. There's not a whole lot we can do about that one. There's two uses in here that are taken collectively. One of them is, in fact, shopping centers. The other one is called specialty centers. These are little strip centers along the road. Because we recognize turnover. We don't think it's necessary that every time a shop goes vacant and a new shop goes in, that they should pay an impact fee. So we have a broad impact fee that when a shopping center comes in to get a building permit, they are charged the shopping center fee, which covers everything in there. And it assumes, we sort of averaged out what kind of businesses are generally in these things, and it assumes there's going to be turnover. May or may not be a theater, may or may not be a big department store, may or may just be small shops, maybe a barber shop, beauty parlor, whatever. Rather than the county having to chase down every time a tenant changes in a shopping center, that ain't worth it. So we have that general category. If a shopping center developer says, gee, but wait a minute, this doesn't apply to me, they can appeal it. They can say why they're different than the average ordinary shopping center, and see if they can get a reduction that way. And the same thing was for those little strip centers. The stores change over time. A barbershop turns into a restaurant, turns into a tire store. You don't want to be sitting there trying to chase down all these folks. In fact, unless there's a interior finishes permit required to accommodate a new tenant, county won't even know about it. So they have to go ride the roads every month, check out, well, who's in this shopping center this month? That's just a burden. So those two they're generalized. They pay the fee up front. People can move in, people can move out. County's not going to be chasing them down the street trying to get more impact fees out of them.
Okay, staying on that same point, it also appears that the Board of Commissioners can determine who is paying these impact fees. As you said before, that if the county determines that they would like a certain area to be developed with, say, more restaurants and retail, then obviously they can, in effect, waive those impact fees and get the funds for that, I guess, out of the general fund. Once again, it just seems like it's picking and choosing and not being fair and equitable across the board.
Well, first of all, they're probably going to take a look at the policies in the comprehensive plan about future development. Second of all, if they can justify that it's in the public's interest for an economic development or employment standpoint, that certain uses or certain types of uses should be located in one area versus another, they can define those areas and say anybody, well, I told you about the Walton County in their industrial park. They said, if you move into our industrial park, we'll give you a break. That downtown example too, if restaurants and similar uses had an impact fee established, but if they moved into the downtown area, they got a reduction. And there were some percentages involved on that. These things have to be adopted by the board so that the public policy has been debated. It's out there. It's been adopted in the public. I can't tell the Board of Commissioners what they can or can't do, but it can be used. It's not a very good tool, but it can be used to advance public policy with regard to land uses. That, in my opinion, is better handled in the comprehensive plan and the rezoning process, but I'm not telling you it can't happen. And if there's a stated public purpose to be achieved, that would be a basis for these, for granting exemptions.
Bill, I have a question related to Section 4. The term dwelling unit and housing unit, those two terms are both used in there, neither one of which are defined.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm curious whether we need a definition, because when I look at Section 4, item AC, it says replacing a residential housing unit with another housing unit on the same lot or property is not subject to an impact fee. If I have a single-family home and I tear it down and replace it with a single-family home, I understand that would not require an impact fee. But if I have a single-family home and I tear it down and I replace it with a duplex, is that now two housing units?
No. Well, yes, it's two housing units, but you'll only be charged for one of them. Because
right. But I will be charged for one of them, correct?
You'll be charged for one of the two because you already paid, well, you either paid or predated impact fees for the one house that they're now. So the impact fees only apply to an increase in demand for services. So the first unit is already covered. That was covered by the house. The second unit increases the demand for services because what was once one dwelling unit is now two. So you would pay an impact fee on that one unit.
No, I understand. I guess, again, my point is that housing units and dwelling units are not defined. And the same question comes up with respect to Section F, where it says I can add a room, I can expand the house, and as long as it doesn't increase the number of housing units. Well, if I add a mother-in-law suite, that theoretically is increasing the demand for services, even though it may only be adding a room to the house. But without defining what a housing unit or a dwelling unit is, I'm not sure how each one of these is going to be interpreted in each situation.
I will check into that. We usually just rely on the zoning ordinance and what those definitions are. I guess it's the land development ordinance. At any rate, when it comes to land uses and specifics, I'll check it out, what that is. And as long as the building code also it gets introduced in here. If you develop a mother-in-law suite in your house, as I recall from the building permit, as long as there's an internal door and the rest of the house, that's not it's just an expansion of one unit. But if you don't have an internal door, the building code says if the only way to get into the mother-in-law suite is from an exterior door, now you got a duplex. It's there are other codes that get considered in this whole thing. But I'll look into it. I'll look into why can't I just use the same term when they all mean the same thing? And
sure.
I can clarify that.
One other question. This goes back to the methodology report, but it's really something I'd like to understand. Page 15 of the methodology report says that impact fees that are not spent or encumbered within 6 years must be refunded to the fee payer with interest.
That's correct.
The spending part I understand. What constitutes encumbering those fees? Because a lot of these projects that we're collecting impact fees for are not projects that are going to be completed with anywhere near 6 years, because you're not going to have enough money to complete them when you're talking
Yes.
about libraries and parks and things like that.
Yes. Here again, the impact fee law has some interesting terminology. Most commonly, people understand, particularly finance departments, understand that to encumber funds, you have to have a contract or some specific agreement to spend money on the project. If you're gonna build a road, you can sign a contract with somebody to build the road, and then you can encumber money, SPOS funds or whatever. You can encumber money, in essence, assigning it to that project, so that when the county finally has to pay for it, there's money in the bank. Well, the impact fee law is looser, strangely enough. And I didn't write that thing. To encumber is to basically assign the money to a specific project, or by any other means approved by the Board of Commissioners. Doesn't have to be a contract, doesn't have to be any kind of an agreement to spend X dollars on Y project. Now, the way we handle these is every year there's a report that has to be prepared that goes to, again, the region and over to DCA for review. It's called the Annual Update Report. And that thing contains two parts. One of them is a financial summary from the most recent fiscal year when there's an audit available. So what did you collect? What'd you do with it? What'd you spend it on? And what do you got left at the end of the year? Part of that report, when we prepare them, others differ, but when we prepare them, we have tables with all of the projects that are approved in the impact fee program. And it's as much a management tool as anything else. But every year when we prepare that annual report, we encumber all of the money that is left over at the end of the fiscal year by assigning it to projects on that table, the up and coming high profile, the high priority projects. In other words, what are we probably gonna spend that money on in the next year, 2 years, 3 years down the road? And by virtue of the Board of Commissioners adopting that annual report, as they're required to do, that encumbers the money as far as the impact fee law is concerned. 2 years later, those money is going to be shifted around. It depends on priorities. It depends on, well, wait a minute, we thought we were going to be working on this road project, but we ran into a problem. We're going to shift to this other road project. So those encumbrances under an impact fee law are much looser, if you will, than under contractual kind of law. So that's what that section means, encumbering it. Because if they don't encumber it, you got to give it back.
So if
we encumber it every year.
So I see Alan's on the call. Alan, the way I read this ordinance as written, it will become effective when DCA basically approves it, approves the CIE.
Well, once DCA indicates to the county that they can approve it, DCA doesn't approve it. They just tell the county, okay, it meets all of our requirements, you can approve it now. The Board of Commissioners has to actually adopt it by resolution. Then they send a copy, a file copy back to DCA to show them exactly what they adopted. But the board has to actually take action by resolution to adopt the CIE.
I guess my question was going to be, given the tight time frame that Commissioner Browning has set, is the county going to be prepared administratively to manage the process with all of the different controls that need to be put in place as quickly as it sounds like this ordinance is going to be ready to go. Because once the ordinance is adopted, the first application for something that's subject to an impact fee is going to have to be managed through that process.
Yes, and that's actually part of our contract. During the period between when the CIE gets submitted and it finally comes back and it's ready for adoption, we're going to be working with the staff. We write our procedures manuals. We have a computer program of our own to calculate the fees, but the county wants the whole impact fee program for the assessment of the fees, the collection, all the records keeping, et cetera, on their mainframe, along with everything else. So we're going to be working with the IT folks. What has this program got to do? We're going to show them how ours works and say this program must be able to, calculate the fee, keep track of it, keep track of any refunds that have to be made, the whole 9 yards. Appeals that are approved, how do you handle those? And so we'll be, instead of installing our own program, which most people just put on their own computer for the building permit folks, we'll be working with staff quite a bit on procedure, both administrative procedures, how to handle these appeals and stuff, and the actual collection and assessment of the impact fees, which will occur simultaneously with the building permit fees. So that'll be closely related to that program anyway. So obviously our goal is the day that impact fees actually become effective in the county, the staff's ready to go. They got everything in place. They can start on whatever day. Most folks say, they're going to start the next day. Others will put a specific date. We're going to start XYZ date. The staff will be completely ready to adopt, to collect those fees, to charge them, keep track of them. Like you say, even though we keep encumbering the money, they got to keep track of those impact fees for at least 6 years in case you do need to make a refund, because they got to make refunds with interest. So there's a lot of record keeping involved in this.
How do you handle the interaction between funds that are collected under impact fees and funds that are collected under SPLOST when the projects are one and the same, or there's a project in both buckets?
The impact fee funds have to be completely and totally separate from all other funds. You'll start seeing them in the annual audit, completely separately reported. Now, if the impact fees are supplementing a SPLOST program, as some may, the finance department is the gatekeeper in this whole thing. The finance department will take funds out of the impact fee account that's appropriate and move it over to the account that's paying for that improvement that way. It may work backwards. That's the most common. They could even, if there's a common project, they could try to combine them in the impact fee fund. It's not a good idea, but you can do it. The other way is that it's not unusual for someone to have a SPLOST project that is also an impact fee project. And as the SPLOST funds are collected to fund that project, to the extent that a portion of it is impact fee eligible, the finance department can transfer funds from the impact fee category, the fund, over to the general fund to, in essence, pay the county back for the impact fee share that SPLOST just got through funding. So I wish I was a finance director someday. I get into my depth when it comes to all the machinations that can go on at the finance department level. I've got several working in communities that are ACEs, and I have referred them. In fact, you have a finance director that has some familiarity with impact fees, but not much. I referred her to these other finance directors to really get the skinny on the ins and outs, because that's one step beyond me of how some of this magic goes on. But it is keeping the book straight is what it boils down to.
This is so Jessica, I have a question for clarity. George asked the question that if the fee is not paid within 6 years, that it would be refunded to the payer. But then you made a statement that the funds can easily be shifted to another category. So if the funds are shifted to another category within, that 6 years, at what point will any funds ever be paid back to the fee payer?
Well, there's two things there. First of all, let's look at the refund part. What the law says is if the money is not spent or encumbered within 6 years, it has to be paid back. That's why we had this whole thing about encumbrances. We encumbered them every year so that it can never be said those funds were never encumbered. Secondly, impact fees collected in any category can only be spent in that category. We can't take Parks and Recreation fees and shift them over and build a fire station. They can only be spent. That's why that methodology report is the Bible for the finance department. They can only spend impact fee money on the projects in that methodology report, and only in the category for which it was adopted or collected. So you can't shift funds back and forth at all. You got to account, and that's what that annual report reflects, that you didn't go shifting money around. What did you collect? What did you do with it? Did you spend it on anything? Did you make any refunds? Whatever, and how much have you got left? And that report is for each public facility category. So there's a column for recreation, there's a column for fire, et cetera, and they all have to be accounted for separately and kept in separate funds.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, I have another question, and this has more to do with, the construction process. And for this, we'll use like a shopping center. I see that under Section 12, enforcement and penalties, that the administrator's designee shall have the right to inspect the lands affected by the ordinance, and shall have the right to issue written notice, stop work order, citation violations as the administrator's designee, in their determination what they may deem to be appropriate. Knowing about construction, and I'm sure you've paid attention as well, as projects go on, you encounter change orders. And the mechanism in place, I would think that if you were changing the footprint of a building to something larger, obviously you would be required to pay more impact fees. But is there a mechanism in place, say that there was a change order submitted, the footprint was changed? I didn't see anything in Section 5B about timing of assessment of payment. I was just wondering, how does the builder or developer or something like this go about change orders, and is it going to cause any stoppages due to waiting on the determination of what the assessment payment would be for these excess impact fees?
If a builder is going to change the footprint, increase the size of the building, do anything, put on a second story, they got to come in and revise their building permit. Building permit is not a blank check. Building permit is specifically issued for what you say you're going to build. So if they're going to, it doesn't apply to houses. A house is a house. But if you say you're building a 100,000 square foot commercial structure, and you think to yourself, well, you know, I got a little extra room here, I might get an extra bay in my shopping center. I think I'll add a bay to this thing. You got to go amend your building permit. Building inspector knows what your building permit says. He's got the plans that were approved. So if you start building something that ain't on those plans, you will be shut down by the building inspector. And while you're trying to straighten out with the building inspector your violation, you'll also be sent over to the impact fee folks and say, you know, well, this guy's adding, you know, 600 square feet to the building. And the impact fee folks would then charge for the extra 600 square feet along with the issuance of the building permit revision to do that. So that's the main surveillance process here. I can't say that there's not thieves and ugly people out there who try to get away with stuff, but by and large, if you make enough of a change in a building, the building inspector is going to be out there, at each step of the way, the electrical inspection, the structural inspection, the plumbing inspection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for commercial buildings, you're required to keep a copy of the approved plans on site. So at any point in time, the inspector can say, oh, wait a minute, this don't look like what we approved, and starts that whole process that way.
Well, I was just concerned that, you know, it seems that there would be another level of bureaucracy and being involved in pulling building permits if it had to go through yet another step. That it could cause more delays in construction that could be expected currently. And I didn't know if there was anything that there would be in the ordinance as far as the efficiency of the evaluation of what that impact fee would be.
Well, it's just tied to the building permit. The person's got to come in. If they get caught, or even voluntarily, they come in and they apply for a revision to their building permit or for a new building permit. The impact fees are calculated right at the same time as the building permit is being considered, and any change would be identified at that point. I mean, your building permit fee is going to go up, as well as, of course, the impact fees. And the computer will tell us how much more that person owes for this expansion. There's even, and I'm going to anticipate another question. There are folks who build buildings on spec. They don't know what's going to go in there. They're going to build a spec building and put it on the market for lease. And people come in. Maybe they take this 20-foot bay. Maybe they want a 60-foot portion of it. Who knows what it is? Or just, well, I don't know. I'll rent this whole building to anybody, but I don't know who it's going to be till they show up. There's also a provision in the procedures that will handle that situation. The long and the short of it is, the building permit, of course, is very specific. How many plumbing fixtures and all that stuff. On the impact fee, between the builder and the staff, they will pick a use that is most likely. Is this going to be an industrial building? Is this going to be a shop? What does the guy think it? If his wildest dreams, he would get in there, and the builder pays an impact fee on that basis. And this is a whole thing about shell buildings and whatnot. There's another procedure that will be in the procedures in which you can build a shell for a minimum impact fee, and then each new tenant would come in and pay their share, their part of the impact fee based on their actual use before they could get a certificate of occupancy. Because all these people need interior finishes permits to build out whatever it is they want to put in there. So then how big is it, where's it going to be, what's it going to be used for, et cetera. So all those procedures are in there, and it's just all part of the process. if you build a shell building and then you find a tenant to move in, that tenant needs an interior finishes, they got to go and get a building permit to do it. So there's a lot of backup and communication between building permit fees and impact fees, all in the same computer and all at once.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill, Gary Neville, I have a question, and I guess it's as far as the single-family detached housing. So St. Simon's versus the island, but really this is more of, I guess, the type. A mobile home pays the same as a stick-built house, correct?
Yes.
So I guess a $5 million house on Sea Island would pay $5,000, and a stick-built house, or excuse me, a mobile home then on Western Glynn County would pay $7,000 if we adopt the maximum amounts.
Yes.
Okay. And for restaurants, fast food and such, the square footage is for the entire building and not just for the seating or for the patron area, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what about, I'm thinking they have a development that's going in down, maybe in the city of Brunswick, I'm not sure, but it's on Altama Avenue. They're looking at putting in tiny homes for veterans and things like that. So if that was in Glynn County, they would be subject to the individual impact fee for each unit, correct?
Yes.
Just put it.
Yes. Yes. And that's part of why that affordable housing exemption is a possibility. The board could say, well, wait a minute, these tiny homes, they're selling for what, $85,000, $110,000. They're small. They still have the same number of people in them who ride the roads and go to, recreate and all of that. But given the price range of them, they could be included in an exemption policy that, if you're building a house 450 square feet or smaller, I think that's the state definition of tiny homes these days. At any rate, if you're building one of these, we'll give you X dollar discount because it's such a small home, and the county decides that it will have less impact on the community than a big home.
I think some of these were like 200 square feet. Actually.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Some of them are shipping containers that have had windows cut in them. Yeah. I saw a big presentation at a conference about converting all these shipping containers into housing units.
Thank you.
This is Gene Lay. I have a question about exemptions. Is there any way that the ordinance could be modified the language so that the in the event the county approves an exemption, they would not have to match the funds from general funds? I can see things such as churches or low-income homes that an impact fee of $7,000, it may preclude them from being successfully able to fund the project. But if the county is on the hook for matching funds for an exemption, I can see where they will be reluctant to offer any exemptions whatsoever.
That's in the state law. They can't ignore the state law. The state law says any exemption under those exemption criteria, any exemption that is granted by the Board of Commissioners must the funds must be replaced in the impact fee funds. It doesn't say it has to come out of the general fund. That's generally where it comes from. Some counties have capital improvement funds. They have all kinds of funds. So it doesn't matter from the state standpoint where the money came from, as long as the money ends up in the impact fee funds to replace the credit.
I can just see where that would be a serious hamper to some of the lower cost developments.
And I don't disagree. I think I said I was going to talk about something I never really did very much. by and large, I recommend that cities and counties think about using that appeals process instead of the exemption process. And in appeals, the county can set up criteria. You know, if you're building a tiny home, you can appeal your impact fee to the county, and your housing fee will be reduced by X, whatever makes sense. And there's no actual requirement to specifically transfer money in to make up for the loss. And at some point, you're going to run short. You know, you keep spending, you keep granting exemptions, and you don't replenish the fund, then you're going to run out of money before you run out of projects. The saving grace of all of this, if you will, is that over time, the county will probably update the whole impact fee program every 5 or 6 years. And they'll start from, well, I say start from scratch. You've already got a whole lot of projects yet to be built and whatnot. They'll add 5 years to the projection period, so we'll be looking at 2055 instead of 2050. And all those calculations in the methodology report all get done all over again with new projects, new level of service requirements based on what they've got or where they want to go. You start all over again. So in a way, yes, you're going to end up a little short in the impact fee funds if you don't transfer money into the accounts to make up for exemptions or reductions of any kind. On the other hand, some of that's going to get cured every time you go back and recalculate the fees all over again. So it's a good idea to replenish the fund. It'd be financially smart to do it. But unlike the state law provisions, you're not required to do it. In the case of those exemptions, you're required, you got to do it. You got to find the money somewhere. So this kind of goes back to the finance department trying to figure all this out and keeping the books straight.
Bill, one question that just kind of goes back to the equity kind of question that was asked in the beginning. It just seems disproportionate. When I look at the cost or the impact fee for a single family home on St. Simons, and I look at the fact that almost 50% of that is attributable to Parks and Recreation, and only about 25%, maybe less than that, 20% is attributable to roads. It doesn't feel to me like there's enough money in here to deal with the roads issues that we have on St. Simons. There's only 2 specific projects identified, neither one of which is Frederica Road. And it just seems disproportionate that we're talking about impact fee eligible projects for Parks and Recreation of almost $16 million and something on the order of $3 million for roads.
The road projects in there are the ones that were identified by the county engineer, pulling projects out of, on the one hand, the BAT study and all of those roads, and there's not much in the BAT study for St. Simons. And also the county engineer had identified a number of individual road projects throughout the county. They were part of, the Board of Commissioners was considering a new SPLOST program not long ago, and they decided to defer, so they didn't make a decision. This was a list of potential road projects that the county engineer had come up with, not all of which could have been included in that that next SPLOST. But we took that list and said, well, maybe it won't happen in the next 6 years of the SPLOST program, but they make sense that these projects would be done by 2050 at the latest. And many more of those were in St. Simon's, as I recall. They had already done all those intersection improvements in that earlier St. Simon's report. But at any rate, we segregated them that way. Where are these road projects? Whether they're on the mainland or on St. Simon's. And what you see in the report is what was identified either in the BATS study or by the county engineer in considering the next SPLOST program.
I understand, and I'm not questioning the source you used. I'm questioning the fact that the source, we've had this comment on the BAT study for quite some time. The population projections that were used in the BAT study didn't identify where that population increase was going to go, and as a result, didn't identify the road improvements that needed to be made to support the population increase. The population increase you've assumed in here is almost double what was in the BAT study and what was in the comprehensive plan, and yet there's no additional road funds. All that development is supposed to be at the north end of the island. There's no additional funding in here to deal with that. The BAT study even contemplated building a second causeway as one of the potential projects. Again, I'm talking more about the disproportionality of so much money being allocated to parks and recreation, which most people would say we're not particularly deficient in right now, versus such a small amount for roads, which everybody will say we're deficient in right now.
Well, with regard to parks and recreation, we're not saying you're deficient at all. We're saying what you've got serves the residents of St. Simon's right now. But we've established that as the level of service. If you want future populations to enjoy the same level of service that the people who live there now, that's where those projections come from. How many more, and we looked at existing facilities specifically, how many more of what you've already got would you need to supply to deal with the demands of future population growth without degrading the level of service to the people who are there today? And that's where that number comes from.
Understand, and that makes sense for parks and recreation, but that same criteria applied to roads doesn't make sense, because
I don't have a road plan that shows me anything other than the road plans the county has. I can't pick up road projects. And the road impact fee is based on projects. So I put every project between those two sources in there. I think there was one more intersection from the old intersection study that had not yet been done. So I brought that one forward also. But I couldn't make up roads. I couldn't just make them up. Here are the roads that are being planned, and the trips that will be generated on the island, and how much the fee needs to be to handle those trips. If I were you, I'd demand a new road study, because there wasn't much in either of those reports. There were some in this potential SPLOST that has yet to be approved. But I'm trying to think. I think there were only 2 intersection projects in the whole BAT study.
That's correct.
Well, yeah, okay.
And one road widening, which was a section of road that is not where the bottleneck is.
So I strongly implore you to press the county that you need a better transportation plan out there, because particularly if the transportation plans in hand didn't assume anywhere near the growth that I'm projecting, which is still way below the capacity of growth on the island. They need to go back and revisit that. Until they do that, I can't put those road projects in there to charge a fee for it. If I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but if there aren't any more questions, we need to discuss a next meeting, if you want to have another meeting. And I don't have, the schedule was on that PowerPoint presentation, but,
I can bring that back up.
November 5th is 2 weeks from tomorrow.
okay. Stephanie, if you would call up that last slide, the coming up slide. Because we know we've got two public hearings coming up on the ordinance, as well as one of those is for the CIE. And my question to you is, do you think that you should meet again before the first public hearing or before the second public hearing? Once you see, like I say, most likely the ordinance and the first public hearing is just going to have the maximum fee. I'll be pleasantly surprised if the board has actually made a decision on what to put in there on the first, but that's up to y'all. And this will be an in-person meeting if I can get it close to the board meeting, because Pam wants me physically at that November 5th meeting.
Bill, can you help us understand the process the commissioners are going to go through to get to whatever the fee schedule is going to look like that's going to accompany the ordinance?
I wish I knew. I can advise them in that I have a little spreadsheet program on my computer that we can test people. You know, I can either meet with the commission as a whole in public, or however they want to do it. They can call this in on the telephone, but I can test various approaches. What happens if you reduce fire, but you don't reduce roads? What happens if you reduce everybody across the board? And so we can run tests. I can't tell you what they will think an okay total fee will be. And that, of course, is generally the interest of most people. What's my total fee going to be? So that's a process. I can work with them on it. I can respond to their questions. I can't tell them what the fees ought to be. I can only tell them what the maximum is, and you can't go over it. So,
but right now they have nothing scheduled to work with you between now and November 5th.
That's correct. And I'm relying on Pam to work with them and find out how they want to do it, and then just let me know when I need to be available and how.
When is our final recommendation supposed to go to the Board of Commissioners? Is it prior to the November 19th meeting? Or?
Well, there's no real schedule for when your report is due. It's whenever you want to do it. That's strictly up to you. And you don't have to wait for one day and make all your recommendations. You can make recommendations on the CIE, then you can make recommendations on the ordinance, whatever you want to do, and you can do it as a group. Or frankly, I don't think that they would. I haven't spoken to them about this. I don't think they would be adverse to you. If you have a particular thing you want to talk to a commissioner about, you're a citizen. You can do that. If you want, can't hold you back from that. If you want to have a unified report from the committee, it's up to y'all. You can work out what goes in that report, and get a majority vote on it, I guess. The procedures are up to you. The report and how you report it is up to you. I'm just here to feed you as many facts as I can and keep you confused.
Bill, this is Sherry Gibbs. And this goes back to some of what I addressed in my email today. I think we were appointed to this committee to advise the Board of Commissioners. And I think most of my fellow members here would agree with that. So I do think we need to work toward some consensus from this group that we would present to the Board of Commissioners. In fact, I think they would expect that of us.
You know, you're not my committee. I'm using you as a sounding board for ideas and direction, but you're not my committee. You're the board's committee. And I agree with you, Sherry, that I mean, I don't know what was said at the time you were appointed. I wasn't there. I know they came up with a list and appointed those. Well, they probably contacted you to be sure you wanted to be appointed. Well, I think they took nominations from the two planning commissions, right?
Right.
And then they appointed the chair and the co-chair themselves. So yes, you can prepare a report. I think they would love to see it. I can't tell you what ought to be in it. It obviously needs to be reflecting your concerns. And you, excuse me, and y'all can have meetings without me there. I mean, you're not my committee. I'm here as a resource when you need me. But y'all could meet and talk about what ought to go in this report, what recommendations you want to make, and put that together. Talk to Pam. If you need staff assistance with this in some way, she probably assign poor old Stephanie, because Stephanie's here. She probably assign somebody to work with you and try to get the language on paper. I don't know, but you are the commission's advisory committee, and that's who ultimately you're advising. You're just keeping me straight as best you can.
Thank you.
Just remember the burden we have if we're going to try and develop something as a committee is that each committee meeting's got to be a public meeting.
Yes. Well, yes. If it's an official committee meeting, we have been obviously advertising them and whatnot. I don't know where you actually fit into the rules and regulations of the county. Whether or not you're actually required to meet in public, I can't tell you. That's the truth. I just don't know. County attorney might be able to give you better direction on that.
Bill, I can add to that. Yes, since the committee was created by the Board of Commissioners, it does fall under the Open Meetings Act. So all of their meetings have to be public and have an agenda in advance.
So as long as you don't have a majority, some of you could get together independently. But yes, if you want to have a meeting where you adopt a specific report as the report of the committee, that's going to need to be a public meeting.
I would like to address Jason. Jason, are you still on?
I am.
Okay. I'm thinking since you are the co-chair of this committee, and if you are in agreement with this, then perhaps you might want to talk with Pam and see what she suggests about where we go.
Yes, I will reach out to Pam and see about arranging a meeting to where, because I think all of the committee needs to be able to weigh in on this before we make a formal recommendation. So I will reach out to Pam and see if we can get a meeting scheduled. If everyone seems to be okay with that.
Sure.
As we say, sounds like a plan.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, I would make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Sounds good.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.